Sure. It's great to be with you guys today. In terms of my background, so my name is Vijay Chetty, and I am the CEO of Eclipse Laboratories, which is the team behind the Eclipse protocol. Eclipse, in a nutshell, is the most performant layer 2 on Ethereum, and it combines the best of Solana as well as Ethereum. My background involves being in the crypto industry for close to about 10 years now. So previously to being CEO at Eclipse, I was also head of business development and growth at Uniswap, DYDX, and I was also at Ripple from 2015 to 2018. So worked with the Korean market very early on as well there. And then prior to that, I was also on Wall Street. So I come from a traditional finance background. Yes, at BlackRock, I was an investment manager. So that involved doing research and analysis for corporate investments that BlackRock was making into bonds, corporate bonds. So I was looking at companies and talking with the management teams, looking at the capital structure, and then coming up with trade ideas and investments for the portfolio. The portfolio was about $65 billion in assets for institutional LPs and other asset managers. So it was a pretty significant fund, and we were quite active in those markets. Yeah, so BlackRock was a great place to start a career. And of course, as one of the largest financial institutions out there, it provided me an opportunity to really get deep exposure and involvement in the financial markets. So working with the investment banks and trading desks and other funds. Um, but I think for me personally, I was looking for a more entrepreneurial experience, being able to build out a new market and shape things from the ground up. So I took that experience I had at BlackRock with traditional markets, and I saw a very early opportunity for the crypto industry to develop in the same direction, right? Because back then you had Bitcoin, Ripple or XRP, Ethereum, Litecoin, and maybe one or two others like Doge, right? And so it was a very small market, but I saw an opportunity to grow out trading, payments, custody, and all the other parts of the financial ecosystem. So uh, it was a really exciting opportunity to make that jump and take the knowledge I had, but also operate in an entirely new space that was combining the finance layer with the technology and the legal and social layer. So it was a very interesting time in 2015. And in terms of my most significant achievements at Ripple, it was to build out the liquidity and use cases for the XRP asset. So I was on the very early team that was driving use cases. So coming up with the cross-border payments use case, going out and pitching to banks and payment companies, and then also to get XRP supported by exchanges, market makers, custodians globally. So in around 2016 or 2017, I worked very closely with the Korean exchanges at that time. So Corebit, Coin One, the exchanges that were dominant at that time to support XRP and the ecosystem around it. So we were able to build extremely deep liquidity and also to bring on the large banks and financial institutions who now are using XRP for payments. Yeah, so there's a few things I think are important in terms of picking companies to build up or to advise or to work with. And I think it comes down first and foremost to passion and use cases, right? So where is there an opportunity to really shape and improve things from where they are today, or to bring a revolutionary new approach to a certain segment? And I think starting with that kind of first principles, passion and interest is very important as the first step. And then beyond that, I think it's about really identifying what are the key things to make a successful project, right? So it's very similar to even in Web 2 or Wall Street. How do you build a successful business? You need to outline a vision or set a vision, then start to build a team around that vision, come up with the 0 to 1 product, and test out the market and iterate until you find that product market fit, and then scale up in efficient ways, and then eventually drive a lot of hyper growth, right? So this playbook remains the same. And I think for me, it's always been about identifying where are those right ingredients and then building the team around it and scaling things up to really capture the opportunity. So we were able to do that at Ripple, at DYDX, and at Uniswap with the launch of the Uniswap X product. And so that's really always been the North Star for me and how I think about that. And then I think the other thing is also, there's so many projects in crypto today that really focusing on where is the big opportunity, but also where are the quality teams who are shipping real product and shipping real metrics versus just the hype, right? Because of course the marketing and hype is an important component as well, but it's more valuable and more powerful and more sustainable when it's done with real product and good intentions and integrity as well. Yes, absolutely. I think the convergence of Web 2 and Web 3 is a huge opportunity, right? And of course, we've started to see some of that in the last 6 to 8 months or so with an acceleration of ETF approvals, more Wall Street institutions in the US and also globally coming into the asset class, uh, whether that's from a custody perspective or investment and trading perspective. So there's a lot of great strides here. And in particular, a lot of that has been around real world assets as well as tokenized assets, right, including stablecoins. So this is an area that is going to see huge development and adoption over the next few years, and Eclipse is uniquely positioned to take advantage of it. And this comes down to the Eclipse technology itself, right? So earlier I mentioned that Eclipse is combining the best of Solana and Ethereum, right? So Eclipse is a layer 2 for Ethereum, but it uses the Solana VM for execution. So you get the speed and performance of Solana, but the liquidity and user base of Ethereum. So it's the best in class stack, and it gives users and app developers the best of all worlds. So with that advantage, Eclipse can really enable developers to come in and build apps at the scale that they can build in Web 2 or even beyond that. So this comes down to the Eclipse architecture, which we can talk a bit more about in a second. But because of this, Eclipse is uniquely suited to app developers coming from Web 2 or Wall Street developers that want to build large-scale applications with potential for mainstream adoption. So Eclipse is really focused on enabling those developers, going out and educating those audiences that know Rust or that might have an interest in this angle of Web 2 scale apps. And also, given Eclipse's capabilities, it's well suited for high throughput financial applications, which includes real world assets and stablecoins. So right now we're having advanced discussions with a lot of the leading financial institutions in the space who are moving in this direction, right? And these are companies like BlackRock, Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, major asset managers who see opportunities to tokenize their funds and their assets. And so those are things that we like to see come onto Eclipse and really provide users in Web3 and a broader user base with access to these asset types that previously may have only been accessible to a few. Sure. So Eclipse, simply put, is the fastest and most performant scaling solution for Ethereum. So Eclipse is a layer 2 solution for Ethereum, and it uses the Solana VM or virtual machine for execution. So the execution layer is similar to Solana, and then it settles to Ethereum, which means that Ethereum users and assets can access applications on Eclipse and vice versa. And then Eclipse uses Celestia for data availability. So because of that, you get the fastest rollup with access to the largest user and asset base, as well as the cheapest cost of transactions thanks to Celestia. So it's combining the best of all worlds and the best stack that you can build in today's environment. On top of that, because Eclipse is a layer 2, we can do something uniquely that the Solana layer 1 is not able to, which is to have a more limited sequencer set and for the Eclipse rollup to benefit from hardware acceleration and hardware software co-design, which we recently wrote about in our performance white paper, which was launched a couple of weeks back. So with this, we can continue to accelerate the throughput and the performance of Eclipse and support scale that may even exceed what is currently possible in the Web 2 environment. So the North Star for Eclipse is to be the fastest and cheapest rollup on Ethereum. So that's the product stack. And in terms of the vision that brought us to build Eclipse, it was really about bringing the scale that you see in the broader mainstream Web 2 world, bringing that scale to Web 3. Because if you look at the AI industry, a lot of these LLMs have been able to benefit from hardware improvements with FPGAs and GPUs. And this hardware-based improvement hasn't necessarily translated to the crypto or blockchain space. So with the Eclipse solution, you're able to tap into that type of hardware and start to have transactions per second that goes into the millions, right? So right now Eclipse has the leading transaction per second metric with the peak TPS of 9,000 and sustained TPS of 3,000. This is far higher than what other L1s or L2s have seen historically. And Eclipse is just getting started, right? So as we move more into hardware acceleration, we're able to deliver transactions per second that are 1 million and above. So we can really support Web 2 scale with Web 3. And this is something that we feel was lacking in the industry to date, right? There's lots of layer 2s and all sorts of solutions out there, but you can still only get into the few hundred transactions per second. But the Solana virtual machine is capable of supporting many high throughput apps seeing significant usage. And so that's a really powerful design paradigm that Eclipse can leverage to support this extremely high throughput. So that was really the North Star for Eclipse from day one, was how can we bring the speed of Web 2 with the user base and distribution of Web 3? Yeah, it's a great question. So the Solana VM is the virtual machine that is used in the Solana layer 1 for execution. So it is a parallel to the EVM that exists on the Ethereum L1. And the SVM has significant advantages over the EVM, particularly the ability to support many high throughput apps at once. So you can have many apps that are seeing tremendous usage, extremely high transactions per second, and all those apps can still operate smoothly, which is something that's not possible in the EVM environment. So taking the SVM and combining that with Ethereum gives users and app developers the best of both worlds. They can build in comfort knowing that they won't run into capacity constraints, and that even if they build something extremely viral, or if they build something that is a high throughput trading application, that they will not run into limitations the way they might with EVM infrastructure. So we think this is a big breakthrough from the perspective of Ethereum, right? Because Ethereum has been struggling more broadly with kind of stagnation or the existing set of rollups and technologies. And so bringing external technology from the Solana ecosystem is a way to breathe new life and new capabilities to Ethereum, right? So now not only can you bring in new developers who are familiar with Rust or who have a different paradigm for building their products, but you can also bring much higher throughput and have these apps coexist in the same environment. So this is really a breakthrough from the perspective of Ethereum. And in terms of Solana itself, Solana has been a great proving ground for the SVM, and Solana L1 will continue to be big, of course. But we see a lot of benefit to exporting the capabilities of Solana to Ethereum, and then continuing to iterate on them in a way that only Eclipse can as a layer 2, right? Because if you're building a layer 1, even if it's a layer 1 with the SVM, you have to manage against security and decentralization priorities, right? So you can only have a certain throughput, but if you're building a layer 2 like Eclipse is, then you can have a more centralized sequencer set, which allows you to benefit much more from throughput and performance improvements, and you don't need to deprioritize performance improvements because you're managing for security. So it's really the best of all worlds in terms of being an Ethereum scaling solution. Yeah, so one challenge I think Eclipse, along with Solana and the SVM ecosystem more broadly, faces is that if you zoom out, Rust is a more complex programming language, and the SVM is more complex to work with than the EVM, which uses Solidity as a programming language. So as a result, you kind of have this higher barrier to entry where there's a higher hurdle rate to developers being able to build for the SVM. So for that reason, there's more of kind of a lead time or hump for developers to get over in terms of building on Eclipse. But this is something that we think can be solved through developer relations, proper developer tooling. Solana did a good job of this with Anchor. So developer tooling is a big part of this, but we think that's something that can continue to be solved through education and awareness in terms of making the SVM and Rust more accessible. Of course, inside the crypto space, there's more awareness of Rust, but if you really want to bring in mainstream developers who are interested in building breakthrough applications, we have to go outside of the industry. Yeah, it's great to see the development of these institutions and how they're coming to the space now in terms of an investment perspective, but also with creating assets and providing that asset supply. And so I think BlackRock and Fidelity are definitely just a start, right? And we'll start to see this on a more global basis, especially with, I think the environment that we're in right now with tariffs. There's an opportunity for this technology to also create potentially new connections or solutions to facilitate more of these OTC type markets or new channels beyond the existing trade channels or economic channels that we've seen to date. So it's a little bit of a paradigm shift, and it's interesting that there's this adoption that's happening at the same time as well, right? So there's a big opportunity here. So at Eclipse, we're thinking a lot about this and talking with all these institutions to bring on that asset inventory to Eclipse in terms of real world assets and tokenized funds, as well as stablecoins, right? And because Eclipse can support this high throughput trading, because it combines the best of Solana and Ethereum, you're able to distribute these assets to a large user base, but you're also able to support very high throughput trading and activities with those assets, right? So users can, if they're a perpetuals order book trader, they can trade with very high frequency, right? You can have the type of trading activity that you see on a centralized exchange like Upbit or Binance. That can happen on a decentralized exchange on Eclipse. So combining that performance and speed along with the user base and liquidity of Ethereum, you can really start to develop a broad user base for the assets that these institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and Franklin Templeton are issuing, whether that be a tokenized fund or a stablecoin. So a good example of this is a private equity firm called Apollo, who is an investor in Eclipse. So Apollo was one of the earliest to tokenize a fund and launched it on a few blockchains. So we're working with them to bring that same asset inventory to Eclipse and bring these very unique types of products that you don't see more broadly, right? And that's a big part of the story, is democratizing access to these products that maybe didn't have a broad investor base previously, right? They were only available to accredited investors or large financial institutions. With the distribution of a product like Eclipse, you're able to get these products out to a much broader base and make them easier to access. And so then users and investors who didn't have access to these products previously can start to get involved in these markets and ramp up. So that's a big part of what we're thinking about at Eclipse, is how can we bring that asset inventory onto Eclipse and to the user base. And the other part of this, of course, is the development of market infrastructure, right? So with the speed and performance of Eclipse, you can really bring central limit order books and high throughput applications on chain. And so you can start to see exchange operators like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ start to leverage this technology as well. And in some cases, these asset managers like BlackRock and Fidelity also get involved and build their own market structure or OTC networks. So you can build these permissioned networks around Eclipse. So that's something that we're also spending a lot of time on, is how can we provide these ring-fenced environments that sit within a broader permissionless network so that you can bring these institutions in. And so that's something that I spend a lot of my time speaking with these institutions on, and we see a huge opportunity around. And then the last piece, of course, is these institutions getting more involved in the token markets, right? So Eclipse does not have a token just yet at this moment, but the Eclipse Foundation will be launching the ES token in the next 1 to 2 months or so. So it's something that we're excited about. And that's something that we're focused on from an institutional investor perspective, is to educate these institutions and other major asset managers on what Eclipse is, what it enables in a unique way that no other infrastructure does, and how the Eclipse token plays into that as well. So that's the third leg of what we're doing with these institutions. Yeah, I think the markets right now are extremely interesting, right? Of course, they're very volatile as well across all markets, right? So from traditional markets and Wall Street all the way down to the exotic crypto markets, you're seeing a huge amount of volatility and shock, which has been catalyzed by the tariffs, but also highlights a lot of other kind of underlying factors. But there's an opportunity for the market to also reset, and I think any correction I expect should soon see a broader recovery. So it's important to keep the long-term game in mind, right? And in terms of teams building long-term products, multi-cycle products, as well as taking a multi-cycle horizon towards the investment activities, right? So what are the products and teams and tokens that you can really bet on and make big opinionated bets long-term? Because in this market, we have so much saturation and choice, right? There's so many projects of every kind of infrastructure application. So it's important to really, as a team, and for Eclipse, it's important to have a vision and execute in a clear, opinionated way on that vision. And then as an investor, it's important to also have that similar framework and think about what are like the pillars of investment and what horizon are you taking a view on, and then be able to hold positions with conviction as well, right? Because I think unlike previous cycles, when say in 2020, 2021, there was more of like a buy and hold type dynamic that was prevalent in the broader market. But I think now the cycles are a little bit shorter and it's more of a trading oriented horizon, which can affect markets for better or worse, right? But it's important to think about that market structure and what's happening more broadly, and be able to operate in that environment, right? So for traders, of course, they take shorter term horizons and shorter holding periods. But for investors, if you're looking for something to make a bet on, it's important to also take that longer term horizon. So that's the main thing I'd say in general. It's been interesting to see the Korean markets in particular, with exchanges like Upbit and Bithumb, and how they've at times been different or similar to other markets. But I think we'll start to see also some variation across geographies as well. So I think things are changing very quickly, and I would say just to be aware, to do research, and of course, myself and the Eclipse team are always happy to speak with users, community members, developers, because we really want to bring this technology mainstream and build for the long term. So always happy to chat and have a conversation around that.